So while we're waiting on Jonah, one thing I wanted to say to everybody, you can feel free to ask the questions in the chat box. You can message them through the whole presentation, and whenever we have breaks, we'll answer those questions too. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a topic, but if that's on a topic, we'll respond to it during the conversation, during the presentation. But if it's off the topic, we'll respond to it after.
What's up, Jonah?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good, you?
All good.
Jonah, good to see you here.
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Thanks for having me.
Ready. Yes, sir. I'm excited. I'm excited getting ready with all these questions.
Hope I don't mess it up too much.
No, not at all. So let's wait for one more minute and then we can start. Are you guys now starting to be back busy with the workouts?
Yeah, it's just a little bit. We opened our facility maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and
Okay.
we have a couple of guys in town, but it's a lot of restrictions. But it seems like we'll be able to. The NBA is going to announce what's going to happen in the next few days.
Okay.
So hopefully that gives us some clarity here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hard not to agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, all right. We already have 11 people. I guess we can start with the introduction. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your background?
Yeah, my name's Jonah Herscu. Originally, I'm from Amherst, Massachusetts. It's about 2 hours west of Boston. I was a very average high school basketball player. Somehow I was able to play Division III basketball, very bad Division III basketball player for a few years. And I've worked in a lot of different situations. I started as an intern back when it was the D League, now the G League in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Now it's the Indiana Pacers G League team, the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. And from there, I got connected with the Chicago Sky in the Wnba. So I worked with them for 4 summers, and I was in the Chicago Bulls video room for 2 years as the video intern. And then I went back to Fort Wayne as an assistant coach. And then I was with Nick in LA. I was the assistant video coordinator for 2 years with the Lakers. And then my last year there, I was the advanced scout and player development associate. And then I'm just finishing, or I guess we're on hiatus, finishing up my first year here up in Sacramento on the coaching staff as the advanced scout. So that's
Okay.
a quick background.
And before we start on the topic, can you please tell me what are the duties for advanced scout?
The best way I can describe it is you're a spy.
Okay.
But no, our job is to be an expert on the teams that we play. So we go watch the teams before we play them in person, and you get their hand signals, you get their verbal play calls, and then you work with the coaching staff on game planning and strategy for those games. And our staff is great. Luke Walton, the head coach, is great. He gives me a lot of other responsibilities, on the court with player development and helping the coaching staff in some other ways. But I would say that the job of the advanced scout across the NBA is to be an expert on the upcoming opponents and to help the coaching staff prepare for games.
Okay. And now we slowly come into the topic of player development. So for you, how does the whole process of in-season development go? How do you decide what you want to work on at first? And just in general, how is that process going?
Yeah, so when we're talking about player development, I don't entirely like that phrase.
Okay.
And I think that it has gained a lot of traction in the last 5 or 10 years, and for a number of reasons. It's not a bad thing, but now there's tons of personal trainers and, these player development coaches that don't necessarily work for a team. And I respect everyone, and I know people have to earn a living. But that sometimes is maybe a conflict with the coaching staff. And then also more importantly though, like as resources have gotten bigger and better and there's more money in the NBA up until this pandemic, coaching staffs, the size of them have grown tremendously. So if you look at the NBA 30 years ago, there was a head coach and maybe one or two assistants. And now, you got 12, 13, 14, 15 coaches on a coaching staff. And that's not, frankly, that's why I have a job. So I'm not mad at that. But I think that this notion of player development is ironic because it's not like only player development coaches can work with players to get better. And it's not like coaches back when they didn't have a label as player development coaches didn't work on player development and skill acquisition and skill improvement and all that stuff. So that's where I would start. But to answer your question, I think that the best organizations have total alignment. And that doesn't always mean people agree, but from ownership to the front office, to the head coach, to the coaching staff, to the support staff, which we can get into a little bit later, and the players, that is where the best development happens because everyone's on the same page and there's a constant message. So to answer your question, like to focus on one or two things in the season, I think is the best way to see improvement. We know that if we try to get better at 10 things, we might improve a few of them a little bit. But if we just focus on one or two things, it's easier to see bigger improvement with those things. And, a saying I like, and it's not mine, everyone uses it, but less is more. Let's just master the simple. And again, that's in contrast to what we're seeing a lot now with dribble combo moves and tennis balls and all of these things, these fancy tools, which aren't necessarily all bad. But can you set your guy up going right and come off a screen going left? One hard dribble right, change of direction, whether it's a crossover or through the legs, and come off, shoulder to hip going left. Simple, I think, is where we should all start. And then I just think that it's harder to necessarily work with a player that's playing, in our league 35 minutes a night and then, wear them down in practice and individual development settings. So if it's like a player that's not getting played a lot or a rookie or dealing with an injury, that's where I'd get into some more mechanical stuff like a shot and working on the technique of a shot. But I think in the season especially, it's hard to get into those mechanical things. You can try to tweak some things here or there, but especially at our level, we play so many games that you really have to keep the focus on the games in a way.
Okay. But if let's say we take somebody who's not getting a lot of minutes, the development players, the ones who are playing less than 10 minutes or even less than 5 minutes, with them, is there a certain line where you say, okay, with you, we want to have 10 individual workouts per month?
Like we kind of think about it, not necessarily like we want 10 each month. It just depends on the schedule. So if you think about it as like game days, off days, where maybe we played back-to-back the last 2 nights and the team is off today, and then practice days, I think that's a really good way to split it up. And, some of your practice days are going to be more intense with volume and intensity, and some will be less. But you can the off days or even the game days where players aren't playing, you can supplement those with 2-on-2s or 3-on-3s or more intense individual workouts to try to get their loads higher to almost mimic a game.
Okay. And who decides what those goals are going to be? So let's say if it's coming from the head coach, how do you make sure you give him the feedback that the player is progressing? Is it through the video, stats, or both?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say all the above.
Okay.
I think that players are visual. I know I'm visual, so showing it doesn't always have to be like really specific stats that you do this, 73.9% of the time. I think that can be almost too much. But if you say 2/3 of the time you do this and this happens, I think those stats can be good. And then the video never lies. I have a video background, and every coach now in the NBA is sufficient in video, and they know how to use it well enough. So I think that progress will happen, but there needs to be, if you look at the whole calendar year, from the off season to the preseason to during the season, different stages throughout that, there definitely needs to be progress, report, so to speak, that you're getting everyone on the same page. So that's front office, that's head coach, that's player development coach, that's performance staff, it might be agent. There's a lot in the NBA, there's a lot of different voices, and especially in the player's ear. So, I mean, you can be naive and just ignore that, or you can try to combat that and get ahead of that.
And you mentioned those, I want to say daily vitamins, those 20-minute workouts daily. So in your opinion, what are the keys to make them as efficient as possible?
I think that the biggest thing, like if you were to take one thing I say today, it would be that your player development program should mirror your program. So what I mean by that is both offensively and defensively, you should practice the things that you want as a coach to happen in the game. So, if you take us, for example, De'Aaron Fox gets a lot of logo pick and rolls in games, those low pick and rolls kind of inside the 3-point line. It puts a lot of strain on the defense. So a lot of his individual work should come out of those actions. You take Buddy Hield, comes off a lot of those high, wide pin downs. So those are the shots that he shoots during these, 20-minute, 30-minute daily vitamins. So I think that's really on us as coaches to identify which shots both a player gets and that we want a player to get, because sometimes those aren't always the same. I think another thing with these daily vitamins is we often only talk about shooting, and I don't think for the majority of players, they're not getting most of the shots in the game. And so you know what I mean? So if you're playing with a great player that dominates the ball, what are things you're going to do during the game that you can improve? So, I mean, the whole side of the defense gets neglected totally. So whether you guard a lot of pick and rolls or you chase shooters off screens, I think there's ways to incorporate that into your daily vitamins. And then offensively, whether it's drive and kick or setting good screens, there's a lot of things that I think players want to shoot often, and that's fine, and coaches focus on that. But there's ways to almost trick players into, hey, you're going to slide here and do something defensively, then you're going to come off here for a shot. So it's conditioning, you're getting some footwork in, they're practicing defense, but then you're almost tricking them because they're still getting their shot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And how often, sorry for interrupting you.
No, I would just say that the last few things I would say on that, like with the daily vitamins, is think about the type of teaching and learning you want, for your players. And I think, and I do this a lot too, it's like, okay, you're going to make 5 shots from the short corner. You're going to make 5 shots from the wing. You're going to make 5 shots from the top of the key, work your way around the horn. And that's fine to get a player warmed up or get a rhythm, but that's really not how the game is played. And if you think about this blocked versus random learning, which there's a lot more smart people have dove into this in education and psychology. But if you test people randomly versus only on one subject, they do much better with the random results. And that's how the game of basketball is played. So we really want to help our players improve their ability to read a situation and react, and not always say, hey, you're going to do this right to left crossover here. So we want to give them the tools to be able to read and know what to do. So again, you can't do that all the time, and I know that, and I'm not saying I do that all the time, but I think just be cognizant of that as you're putting together some player development, whether it's vitamins or sessions, and then be creative. Like it's sometimes we're scrunched for time or resources, and at the NBA we have a lot of resources. Sometimes in the D League we didn't. So you might have 3 or 4 people at your basket, and you might only have 10 minutes. So it's okay to incorporate different game-like situations, whether that's 2-on-2, and you can only use your offhand, or you can only use the left side of the court, or 3-on-3 out of this action. And the last thing I would say is that you can be creative. If you have 30 minutes, maybe 25 minutes are up to you as the coach, and then the last 5 minutes are up to me. I heard Brad Stevens talk about this when he was at Butler, and they called it like dream time. So I thought that was really cool. And one of their bigs, he really wanted to shoot threes. And he was a terrible 3-point shooter, but he worked on it for 5 minutes every day. And by the next year, he was a good enough 3-point shooter. And, it might be a guard working on some post-up moves, but you guys know how long these seasons get, and very monotonous. Yep. I think that that's a good way to break that up and keep it fun and light.
Yeah, I'm writing that down about the dream time. That's a good idea to keep the player engaged too.
Yeah.
And by the time the workout is finished, the energy level is going down, but then you're saying, okay, now these 5 minutes, we do what you want.
Exactly.
He's saying, boom, he gets back to 100%.
Engaged with energy again.
Exactly. And how often do you give players a heads up on his progress, and how would you do it?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. I think especially I would probably approach it a little differently from a veteran player to a younger developmental like player. I think veterans have earned the right to have a little more freedom. But the biggest thing is the summers. Like that's really where improvement can happen. So pretty much when the season ends, we need to get the coaching staff, definitely the head coach and maybe the top assistant or 2, and then the coach that works with that player, with the front office, GM, assistant GM, whoever it is, the performance staff. We have a huge performance staff in the NBA. I don't know what it always looks like in Europe, but strength coach, athletic trainer, physical therapist, psyche, mental coach, performance coach, physio, whatever you call it, agent. You want to be as transparent as possible and talk about a plan for the summer and lay it out for them. And, for the NBA this year, it will be a challenge because we don't know what that looks like right now. And it's going to be different than it's been, historically. So that will be a fun challenge to attack for us at a certain point. But then probably checking in about halfway through the summer. And then when you get back for preseason, and then once you really have your team set, I think some things change. There might have been a trade. There might have been a signing in the off season. And it's always about what the head coach wants. You could say whatever you want, but when it comes to on the court, and hopefully the head coach and the GM and ownership are all in lockstep with that. But as player development coaches, you are carrying out the vision for your head coach. So, it's on the head coach, I think, to give very clear, defined roles to each player and the areas they can improve upon. And then everyone does it differently during the season. It might be once a month. It might be just preseason around All-Star break, halfway point, and, by the end of the season. Some of that probably depends on if you're a playoff team or not, and more of like a developmental team or not. But I think when it comes to these feedback sessions and clarity, the last thing I'll say on that is that you really want a player's input and perspective. And if I tell you to do something, you might do it, but if I ask you and you tell me your opinion and we meet, or at least you verbalize that you understand me and you agree, we believe that is going to take it much further. And something I say, maybe I shouldn't say, but like, players are dumb, but they're not sometimes dumb, but they're never stupid. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they can read through bullshit. Excuse me, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but they can they know if you're telling the truth or not. And you want, as a coach, your player to be invested in what you're doing.
Okay, okay. And you mentioned the summer work, and knowing that more and more players in the NBA now starting to have their own workout guys. In your opinion, what are the benefits, and at the same time, what are the problems of players having their own their workout coaches?
The benefits, I'm not sure. If you find out, you can let me know. No, I'm just joking. I think that as a player, to have someone in your corner, and listen, professional players, this is their livelihood. And I never knock a guy for getting in the gym and working. And I appreciate that work and the hustle and all of that. I just think that it gets tricky when a player is hearing something from, player development coach that they hire, who, if they don't tell them what they want to hear, might be fired, and a coach this is their job, at the NBA level. And there's some good, I know a lot of player development coaches who are very good who don't work for a team. So I don't mean that as a diss. I just think that they are trying to serve the player when sometimes that's not what the player needs. The few things I've seen in the NBA that I think have worked is, one coach I know a few years ago, he treated the gym in their workplace just like a regular job. So, if you're a teacher, unless it's, bring your child to work day, you don't bring your kid to work during the school day. So from 9 to 5, the facility was just up to was just for the players and coaches and team personnel. And as a player, if you wanted to bring your guy in or girl in before that or after that, especially at night, they allowed it. And then the second thing, and I mentioned this earlier, but there just needs to be dialogue between the coaching staff and the personal coaches. And this isn't always going to be perfect, but hopefully it's, as a coaching staff, we want to give the same message to the player every time. And if you can accomplish that, I think that's most important. Some of these things get tricky when you have your best players or high profile players have their guys that they work with. And, I don't have a great answer for that. We talk about it every year. But I think you want, as a staff, your players to be working on what you want them to be working on and how you want them to be working on that. So if you can accomplish that with both your staff and maybe a personal person on the side, that's an ideal situation.
Okay. So my question is, let's say you can design an ideal personal coach who works with a player. What actions you would want him to take? Let's say I'm working with one of your players, you never seen me, and the player is telling me, okay, I'm working with Bossy during the off season. What would be the ideal scenario for me to build a better relationships with you in order to help the player?
That's a great question. I would say dialogue and complete transparency. So, if it were me, I would want you to come watch some of our practices, maybe even sit in a individual film session with me and the player, so you can see what I'm saying. And then frankly, from the team perspective, we would send someone to be there with you. So, hey, I'm just going to be there with you. You use me however you want. I'll rebound. I'll play defense. It doesn't matter. But then we're almost doing this together, because think about, what's your main goal as a workout person?
To get the player better, to make sure he reaches his goals.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes
I see what you're saying. To please the player,
Yeah.
to make sure he's coming back.
And again, I'm not saying it's bad, but like if the player doesn't like what you're doing, what's the player going to do? You're not going to have a job anymore, right?
Yeah.
So from the team perspective, and again, almost every player in the NBA has someone they work with that's not on the coaching staff. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's reality. So how can we work with that reality? And, even if it's an international, someone overseas, a lot of teams will send someone there for a week or 2 weeks or a month and be there just to show the support. And really, I just think that we want the same message getting to the player. And if you can do that, if I can do that, however we can accomplish that to make the player better, great. But to answer your question, we just need dialogue, and we need to be able to talk and have explicit communication on progress and goals, so that we're coming at it from the same way, if possible.
And we didn't cover one thing I wanted to ask about watching the film. So in your opinion, how long should it be to make sure that player is staying focused during the whole clip?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a few different ways to watch video. Like I talked about earlier, I'm a former video guy, and we all work with video all the time. But we try to have a lot of one-on-one video sessions, one coach, one player. And this is the way to get the most intimate. And hopefully there can be dialogue. And as a coach, you can hear what the player is seeing and why they're making certain decisions. I think that's where a lot of progress can come in. From a pre-game scouting approach, from a team perspective, I think about 3 minutes is a good length. It can be shorter, it can be longer. I've seen good ones that are 4 minutes. I've seen bad ones that are 2 minutes. So I don't know if there's a cookie cutter answer. About 15 to 20 clips. And the question I always ask myself, like if it's my scout, say, is, am I showing the video to help the team, or am I showing the video to make myself feel better? And players can't remember everything. It's not about what I know as a coach. It's about what the player knows on the court. So I think simplifying things, and again, this could be a little different with a veteran team or a younger team or a high basketball IQ team, or maybe a team that isn't as cerebral and bright. It might depend. Is it the fourth time we played a team, or is it, in the Western Conference, or is it a team we haven't seen all year in the East? And, you can pick up on some tendencies. But I would say, players' attention spans are not that long. So appeasing to that and keeping it short and concise. And what do you want the focus to be on? Is it always about the opponent, or is it just about us? And we want them to adjust to us. And we'll do a little bit of scouting, and here are our coverages. Or the other, kind of mindset is, and I'm an advanced scout, so I love talking about strategy, and it's a big struggle for me. I'm not saying I do this well, but simplifying, and it's that versus the other side of, like, we're going to walk through 5 or 10 plays and know everything they do and every call they do, but then maybe we're not going to have our stuff as well. And then the last thing I'll say is, in a playoff series, that changes a little bit, where you play a team up to 7, a normal playoffs for us is up to 7 times in, about a 2-week span. That's a lot different, and you can get into more play calls and things like that.
Okay. And would the length be different if you're watching it with the player personally, or you just send him the clip and he's by himself?
Sorry, can you repeat that one time?
Yeah. Would the length of the video be different in general if we compare you watching it with the player, or you just sending the video to him to make sure he goes through the whole clip?
Like sending the video to him like the night before or something like that? Yeah, I think it can depend. I think it's pretty universal across the NBA that the night before a game, the video guys will send the players some personnel clips. So it might be 3 or 4 clips on everyone on the other team. It might be a little more if it's a big time player, and a little less if it's a bench player. And normally you can break that up by positions. But now, because teams switch so much, everyone is really sending everything to all their players.
Okay.
But I don't know, really before you get to the game, you want to give as much resources as possible to these players to help prepare them. So
Okay.
do we expect our players to watch everything we send them? Yes. Do we think they do? Probably not. But if you can hit it once, then another time in the shoot around, the morning of a game, and then before the game, by the time we're yelling at the players, this is now the 4th or 5th time that, especially if you had a practice or two, a day or two before, it might be the 5th or 6th time that we've covered something about the other team. So I think that repetition is important.
Got it. And one second. Also about the film, what I wanted to ask, how do you show negative clips and positive clips? What should be the ratio? How much negative would you show to make sure a player is not getting depressed?
That's a great question. I would say that I try to always kind of take the opposite approach. So when we're maybe losing a lot, I think it's a great time to pump the team up and show some positives. And if we're winning a lot, I think it's a great time to show some areas of improvement and keep us a humble team, because we all know it's a long season and there's going to be ups and downs. During an individual session, something we've all heard about is, the Oreo approach or the sandwich approach. You have a good, a bad, and a good. And I think that's good. There might be 3 or 4 or 5 times in the year where they didn't show it, and you need to show that there's consequences for that, and that's unacceptable. And it might be all negative. But I try to be a pretty positive guy and optimistic coach and teach through the positive. So it might even be, hey, here's you struggling doing it, and then here's you doing it, and 2 good examples of that. Or it might be showing them an example of someone else doing it good or bad. Like, a one-on-one film session does not always have to be about that player. I think we can use other examples from across basketball, or even going back in history, to make a point. But hopefully I would say more than half is positive to negative.
Okay.
At least more than that.
Okay. And what do you use to track if the player watched the video or no? For example, if you just send it through iMessage, you probably just saw that the message was read. If you do it on YouTube through the private link, you were able to see how many times player watched it. And I think at some point you're able to watch until what moment?
Yep. Yeah. We've talked about this every year as a staff. We there's a lot of different software to send and apps and different websites to send video. Some staffs deem that important. Others, I don't think we always want to catch someone doing something wrong. I think we can also catch someone doing something right and applaud that. And, whether that's in the game or in a scouting approach during that process. But every coach approaches that differently. I think, some coaches, even in like a scouting report, on the last page will put like, if you read this, come collect $100 and things like that. I don't know if that's legal. So we don't do that, obviously, but
that's a good idea though.
But, there's things like that can help encourage players to do their homework, so to speak. And I also think that some teams have started like quizzing their teams during shoot around. So it might be 5 questions or 10 questions. And I know the Bucks did this a few years ago. We did this in the Wnba with the Chicago Sky for a season, and it might be 10 or 15 questions. And we would, some would be game plan specific, some would be history, some would just be funny things. And really our only goal was to increase the communication on the team. and we would hand it
Okay.
out and we would say, fill this out. And it was funny because the first 5 minutes, everyone would be quiet, and then someone eventually wouldn't know an answer. So she'd look over, and then by the end, everyone was talking and they were discussing game plan things. So I think that that's a good way to increase dialogue between teammates, which that's really what it's about, and helping that connectedness.
Got it. And based on your experience on player development side, you teaching on the court, are there maybe 2 or 3 most common skills or situations that you had to focus on working with players in season that would transfer to the court immediately?
No.
Okay.
But let me, to me, yes. And there's certain things that don't require skill. And, to me, that's sprinting back hard on transition defense. That takes zero talent. And we can talk about it. I can show it to you. I can give you stats. But, to me, that's playing hard. That's a care factor. On offense, you're a wing sprinting to the deep corner. So I think things like that, you can have some quick change in behavior, especially if they don't do it, you sub them out. They're in the NBA, I think motivating your players is important, and you motivate them with money, their contracts, and with playing time. And everything else, might work, and there's little things to do here and there, but playing time is the big thing. And then I think also decision making, I talked about the ability to read is super important, but if a player, let's just say, is hesitant to catch and shoot, getting him or her to step up and shoot, I think these things can be worked on, when you show the video, when you give them positive reinforcement. Those are the things that I think can be almost quicker to translate to a game where, finishing a tricky layup or something like that, you have to acquire that skill, and that takes time. Changing your shot, that takes a lot of time. And then the last thing I would say with that is that we and Pokey Chapman, who I work for in the Wnba with the Chicago Sky, she talked a lot about principles of play, and I love that concept. So it isn't necessarily a specific play, but it's just a concept or a skill. So learning to go and catch. So you attack, the nail, you kick to me, and I run through that ball attacking the rim. Or, I'm a big and learning to guard my man and sprint into an ice. Or, you're a guard, drive and kick and respace, what Steph Curry does so well. So those things, they're skills, yeah, but they're more concepts to play with and these principles of play. So your staff can consider this and deem what's important to your program. But I think that those things are more applicable, and you'll be able to see quicker translation into games than, the 3 dribble combo move, step back 3, the James Harden, which he's really good at doing that. But how many players in the NBA even are doing that every game? Not many. So I think that working, like I talked about earlier, mastering the simple is really a good place to start.
And you mentioned read and react type of drills. So when in season would you choose the drills with no reaction at all when the player is focusing on the volume? And when would you want that reaction to be added?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it depends on how much they're playing in the games.
Okay.
And where we are in the schedule. If we play every other day for a week, the guys that are playing over 30 minutes, we're probably not going live during those off days. And some of them we might take off. I think in the NBA, the last 5 years or so, you've seen this load management come into play, and a lot of performance staffs don't want their players exerting themselves hard during non-games, not during the game. So, ideally, I would say that most of your individual workout is this read and react and learning how to play. But a simple answer would be if it's a low minute guy or, guy that's not getting any minutes, putting them in situations. And it could be a 2-on-2 situation. It could be a 1-on-1 situation. It could be, we have a lot of people on the court, staff members. So I could guard something and you're reading, if I go under the screen, you shoot. If I go over, you curl, things like that.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it. And so basically, if we're talking about the starter for him, it will be just more volume, more getting the shots up without any distractions.
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily think it has to be volume. Like in a game, you
Okay.
don't shoot 10 shots from one spot. It might just be high intensity, low volume. Hey, you're going to
Okay.
shoot 2 from each spot, but we're going to go game speed.
Okay.
Now, I think normally your high minute guys, your starters and your stars, they're very routine oriented. And if it works for a player, it's hard to convince them not to do that, as you know. So I think it's always a compromise where you meet and, hey, let's just try this today. Hey, can we try this one drill? And you're just sprinkling things in until you get to a point where their routine and what you want is almost the same.
Got it. And I have one more question on the topic before we go to Q&A section. And the listeners, you're more than welcome to ask the questions in the comment section. I already have my 5 questions ready too, just in case. So, how do you make the player buy in, especially if you're a young assistant coach or if you even assistant player development? So, what advice would you give to the younger ones who are just starting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A saying I think of is players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think about that a lot. And, in my experience, players don't really care what you've done, how old you are, your gender, what the color of your skin is. I was a pretty bad college, lowest level of college basketball, and I scraped to play for 2 years. So, I think that they just want to know that you're going to be honest. And as we talked about, players can see through this bullshit, for lack of a better term. And they just want to see that you're the same every day. So consistently building this trust by being the most prepared person you can be. And sweat equity is huge for me. It doesn't matter who you are, but you can be out there sweating with the players. And I think that earns trust every day. And the days of sitting on the side as a coach with your legs crossed, telling someone what to do, that's not there anymore. But being out there with the guys, whether it's passing, rebounding, contesting a shot, defending, I think guys really appreciate that. Players do. And then just being aware of the friend versus coach, and we're all in this together. And it's definitely a partnership. And a lot of times players will complain to these people on staff because they're close and they're spending a lot of time together. I'm not getting enough playing time, things like that. But from our perspective, remember that you have a job to do. And yeah, you have to play the game with them and listen to them. But if a guy comes to me and says, hey, I'm not playing, I want to play, I deserve to be playing, I can say, hey, I want to be a head coach. I don't want to be an advanced scout, right? We're all going through these battles, but you have to be prepared. And when your time comes, which in the NBA, your time always comes. You will get an opportunity as a player, but you have to be ready when that opportunity does come. So let's work through your frustrations. And when that time comes, you will be ready for it. So those are a couple of things that I think about.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Jonah. So while people are typing the questions, if they have some, okay, perfect. Already, he got faster than me. If you have one-on-one session with a player and you're working on decision making, what signals do you prefer and why? Showing directions with your hands, voice signals, or playing D with him?
Yeah, I would. That's a great question, Isla.
Ilya, yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. I would say that. Trying to see. Okay. I would say that start with how the game is. So the game is not played with hand signals or, you know, vocal calls. It's defense. So to me, the best way to prepare for a game is make it as much like a game as possible. So, you know, we've all seen the dribbling thing where you touch the lights lighting up. That's good. That's hand-eye coordination. But to me, you're not doing any of that touching stuff in a game. There's no lights to touch. You're reading your defender. So again, I know it can be hard with less resources or less coaches, but as much as possible live or, you know, a coach defending something, I think is much better than voice or hand signals. Does that answer your question, Elia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I see Nick typing a question already, so I got mine quickly. What was the biggest challenge that you had to face during your time in G League, NBA, WNBA?
Oof. Which season? No.
Any.
It's ironic. It's funny a little bit because my first year in the D League, I had to do everything. I was driving players. I had one laundry machine, you know, a washer and dryer in my apartment, and I had to do the laundry every night. So every night I had to sleep for an hour, wake up and change the wash the dryer, and that would take 3 or 4 rounds. And I would go run clinics every day. But the coach I worked for, Dwayne Tickner, was amazing, and I learned a ton from him. And he gave me a lot of basketball responsibility, coaching responsibility on the court. And it's funny because you're younger, you're naive, and I don't think I really understood how everything worked. But I don't know if it was a challenge, but it was really when I look back on that time, it was an appreciation for what goes into the whole operation of running a basketball team, even at the minor league level. And I think now I appreciate the equipment managers more, and I appreciate the people who run clinics and community outreach, things like that, more. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we, you know, in LA, we lost a lot of games. We, you know, those first 2 years, we were a younger team. Kobe had just retired. So it was a developmental years for that team. So I think the challenge of losing a lot, it's in a way harder to continue to improve. So I would say that's probably another challenge that comes into my mind. And you just attack it every day, and you have a job to do. The players have a job to do, and you just got to show up and do your job to the best of your ability.
Got it. Man, Nick got great ones here. The video room is obviously a major entry point for a lot of careers. What do you look for in these candidates who apply for these jobs?
That's a great question. The few things I would say is, if you have former video experience, you know, pretty much 29 of the 30 teams in the NBA use sports code. So the former managers at college levels, they have, in my experience, turned in to be very good video coordinators. There's a seriousness about the business we're going about every day, that they come in knowing, you know, they've been trained well, especially from the top programs in the country. And then the other thing now, a lot of coaches won't hire a video coordinator if they're not of a certain athletic ability and a certain height, which some of us are not, including me, are not blessed with. But I think the ability to get on the court and even play with players is big, because those developmental guys from 11 to 15, or, you know, with the two-way guys, 17, those 4 or 6 players, guys returning from injury, a lot of times a coach will want to play 5-on-5, but rest the starters. So having some people available to play with actual players is useful. But really and it's hard. We get, you know, I get emailed every day. We all do. And we're very fortunate to work in the NBA. But we can teach you in the video room how to code something. It's
Okay.
the loyalty, knowing you have my back, the seriousness of what we're doing, and the want to help the bigger picture. I think that those traits go a long ways as well.
Do you think player development coaches, the ones who work individually for themselves and with the players, do you think they usually get hired too to those positions as video coordinators, or it will be still preference to somebody who was in the college team as a manager?
Yeah, I haven't seen many individual people, like individual workout
Mm-hmm.
coaches get hired in the video coordinator position. Some of those folks will get hired into like a player development
Player
position
development. Okay.
for the video specific role. And there's some independent people who use a lot of video, and I'm sure they'd be great. To my knowledge, that hasn't happened as much as the manager route.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Well, Johan got here. I don't have any questions now, but it's interesting to know how hard it is in this profession.
It's very hard, but we're blessed. Let me tell you that. Like it, I work all day, every day, and work my ass off, but I never work a day in my life. And being able to combine a passion with something that I can get paid to do, I'm very blessed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hard not to agree with that. Same thing for me, even though I'm not in the NBA, but still working with the pro guys. Doesn't matter if I have to wake up at 5 a.m. or go to sleep at 3 a.m.
Yep.
You enjoying it. Okay. Any advice for international coaches or scouts trying to get a job in the States? Nick has some ideas, but doesn't know if you have some insight.
I think reaching out, obviously things like Summer League and the G League Showcase are great places to start. The internet is awesome, emails, and I know a lot of people have gotten a foot in the door by just giving things without asking for anything in return. Hey, here's a
Mm-hmm.
scout report I did on the top 5 European, draftable players this year. Take a look. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to help in any way. Um, it's something that Mike Longobardi, who is a assistant coach with the Washington Wizards, I know him well. He's one of my mentors. He got this from, I believe, Jeff Van Gundy, but he always says, be high work and low maintenance. And I think about that saying every day. Show up, do your job. Don't ask for a shirt. Don't ask for this or that. Just come, give, and people will notice that.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, I'd love to have your thoughts, but that's where I would start.
Okay. Got one more from Everett. It can be tough to track development when a player isn't getting many minutes in games without in-game stats. Are there things you've done to chart or track outside of games a player's progress and development?
Ever, what's up, man? I think that's a great question. I would say I go back and forth with like tracking shots. I think it's a good barometer of where guys are. And I think it's like what you shoot in practice, like without defense, you're going to shoot about half of that in a game. I think that's the correlation I've heard. But like I would almost try to track the process more than the outcome. So did you make the right decision or the wrong decision? Or did you, is it an execution mistake or is it reading and reacting mistake? And we're all going to have turnovers, but did you try to make the right pass? I would look at that. But in the NBA, we have Noah. It's a shot tracking device essentially that is in the gym and tracks every shot, every basket. It's facial recognition, all this stuff. So we have a lot of these fancy tools that can help with that. And listen, analytics is crazy. I don't know everything about it. I'm interested in it, but the game is not played on a whiteboard, right? It's not played with numbers. It's played on the court with players. And it's easy to think that it's so easy to just do this because the numbers say this. But the other team is trying hard also. So I think it's easy to get bogged down with the numbers. And track and development I know is important. So I don't think I have a great answer with that outside of games. And listen, like I love player development, being on the court with guys. but the best player development happens in games. Young players have to play in games. They have to play in meaningful games. They have to realize it's not easy. And that's where, like, when used well, I think the G League is such an important and useful tool because these young players can play in actual games. And so that's what I would say about that.
Okay. And got a great one from Everett. I really love it. What have been some of your best practices or advice for showing film one-on-one? How often do you show film one-on-one? When to show, before court work, after? What film you show if player isn't getting minutes? What is the balance between talking through every detail and just letting clips play?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, it depends on the player, but oftentimes, like, our defensive coordinator might take a guy after his workout, with a player development coach and sit down with him and show him 5 or 10 clips. I know some teams, when you get to the basket for your individual, vitamin pre-practice workout, they'll have an iPad or computer there to show you 2 or 3 clips or 5 clips. So it depends. I think that a good balance is good. And every player is different. Some guys might want to see it before they work, might want to see it after their workout. I don't think that matters as much. For a player that isn't getting minutes, I think showing them a player that both they can mimic, and I don't love comparisons because I think it boxes someone in and it puts a limit on what they can be. But if you have a really good shooter coming off screens, take your pick of the Klay Thompsons, the Reggie Millers, Ray Allen, it doesn't matter. And I think sprinkling in some of those. And then, the detail versus letting clips play. I try to always let a clip play fully before I rewind and stop it and talk details, just so that the player can understand the whole context of that clip. Or it might be a offense, defense, offense possession, 3 possessions in a row. But to me, there's a third option also of talking through every detail and just letting the clip play. Like, I want the player talking as much as possible because then I can understand what they're thinking, and then and what they're seeing and what they're feeling, why they're doing certain things. And that's where change can happen. If I just talk, I think that the player isn't given a voice to give his perspective.
And that's a great answer to a great question.
Great question.
So, Nick is going to give his thoughts next week when he'll be presenting. One more that I have, and I always ask coaches that. So to me, teaching floaters is a little bit controversial since there are some coaches who want it to be more of a push, or somebody wants it to be more follow through. In your opinion, how do you teach it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends on the player. Well, maybe that's a cop out. But really, I think using the knee, and there's times to do it off 2 feet, but using the one knee to help you get the arc with the shot, I think that's important. And like when I'll warm up with floaters, I often say, like, use that knee to get it up. So the right knee helping the right arm get it up. Is it a shot or is it a push? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Okay. To me, it's both, depending on the player, what he's comfortable with.
Yeah.
For example, the main player I worked with, Aaron Jackson, he actually played a little bit with the Rockets. So when it's his right hand, he wants it to be fully extended with the wrist closed. When it's his left hand, he's more comfortable with the push. Just because when I'm asking him to make more of a push with the right hand, I'm trying to look where the ball is going, and the ball is going always in different directions. Whenever he's keeping the follow through, it's going at least in one line. And so then getting the feedback from him saying, look, this for right hand, I'm more comfortable with the follow through. And then just, to me, feedback is most important. And actually, yesterday we had a conversation with Corey Harris. He's assistant coach for Beijing Royal Fighters for Stephon Marbury. And he just divided into, I think, more of a push. He's calling it floater. With the follow through, he's calling it runner. And he's just saying two different types of shots. That's an option too.
Yeah, and I also think the angle, like if you're going the bank shot, it might be a quicker off two. Whereas if you're coming down the lane and you're just doing that little floater, Mike Conley, he's so good with that right hand. Whereas like you're coming, Derrick Rose was so good at off two, that little bank shot. So I think it depends the scenario a little bit as well.
Okay. And one more I have, I see in our conversation, I see a guard from Russia, I see a guard from Uruguay, coach from CSKA Moscow Academy, and so basically, and a coach from Colombia. So all of them are either working with kids, with youth, or they are youth players. And all three of them are playing guard position. In your opinion, what are three main skills that every youth guard needs to work on?
Playing with the ball not in your hands. So learning how to come off screens, learning how to cut, learning how to set screens and slip. I think that's so important. And like I talked about earlier, everyone wants the ball in their hands and to shoot, and that's good. That's important. But when you guys make it to the NBA, you're not going to be Steph Curry. You're not going to be James Harden. Unless you are, and then come find me and tell me I'm wrong. But you're going to be in the corner. You're going to be coming off screens. All of these things that I think in Europe, actually, and not in America, these skills are probably taught better and more. But this, as seeing the game where it is, players don't know how to play without the ball in their hands. So that's one thing. I think footwork is huge. So whether it's defensively getting into the ball and pick and rolls, whether it's curling off a screen, whether it's snaking a pick and roll, whether it's catch and shoot, getting your feet set and getting the patterns of your feet. I think that does not get looked at enough. And then just being able to make quick decisions. It's a lot of coaches talk about 0.5. You have 0.5 seconds to drive it, shoot it, or pass it. Being able to play off the catch. Every skill level you go up, the time shrinks and the space shrinks. Athletes get better and longer and faster, and defenses get better. So you have less and less time and space to make decisions. So being able to make quicker decisions would be my third. And it's crazy. Like I would say the majority of your skill workouts maybe accomplish some of all three of those, but are all with the ball in your hands.
Yep.
2 ball pounds, 1 ball pound, shoot. And that's good. But what if just every day you added 5 minutes of curling off screens and there's no ball? I think that these things go a long, long ways.
Yeah, agree that it has to be incorporated. It has to be both because you're not going to spend all the time with the ball. And those 2 ball handling drills and all that, it can be good just for warm up to get to increase the body's temperature, to work in your handle. But at the end of the day, you want to be playing with 2 balls in the game. So you have to be comfortable in game situations.
Absolutely.
So since there are no more questions, I have one more on my own before we finish. Are there any books that you usually recommend reading to players or maybe to younger ones when you see that they're struggling and you're trying to help them find that focus, find that motivation?
Yeah, I love to read. Probably my favorite book of all time is Mind Gym by Gary Mack.
Yes.
You know it?
That's my top 3 for sure.
Okay. And then another one is The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galloway. Top 3?
Yeah.
Okay. I gotta think of my third one. Those are the first 2 that pop in my head. Third one. What would your third one be? Let me guess. It's probably not a Phil Jackson one, but you probably like those. I don't know. What's your third one?
Oh, the third one will be The Way of Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
I almost said that. That's a great one. That's a good one. I think the decision-making ones I like that. That might be better for a coach than a player.
Okay.
But Blink by Malcolm Gladwell I thought was very good. There's a lot of books that are coming to my mind, but yeah, those two are really where I always start.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And how I figured out about the Mind Gym. So when I started working with Aaron Jackson, he was already a veteran. He was 31 or 32. He won the EuroLeague when he was 30. And so he gave me that book, and he's like, man, when I first got overseas, that was the book that I started with. And since then, it's my 10th year. I have it with me every time, and I'm reading it at least once through the year
Yep.
just to get mentally focused. And when I read it, like, okay, I'm giving it to my girlfriend, and she's the strength and Olympic weightlifting coach. She read it, and she's like, I'm about to start translating it into Russian because there's just all the information there is gold.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
And
It's
I think it's important for a player too. It doesn't matter if he loves to read or no. If he can find something that can get him on that track, on the right track, especially knowing that NBA or even EuroLeague, the schedule is so crazy and players are easily distracted. If
yeah,
they can find something that can get them on the right track, that will just be another tool for them to use.
absolutely.
But yeah, last thing, can you tell me how people can reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yeah. I will put my email in. Hold on. To everyone. So concoachcollab at gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually started something similar to what you guys are doing. We're doing Zoom
That's
calls
what I wanted to
every
ask
week.
too.
Um, and if you want to get in on those, you can email me. This is the website, and I will put the YouTube link as well. And I know we have people from around the world, so if you can't make them live, I always post them here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then, yeah, I mean, that email is probably the best. Con Coach Collab, is Twitter and Instagram as well. And then just my name on those as well, if you want to reach out.
Yeah, and I just want to say to people if they want to stay updated to the Zoom calls that you post, especially when they're already uploaded on YouTube, Instagram is the best one.
What's the best one, you said?
Instagram, I mean, since people are on Instagram all the time, at least they can go and see because
Yeah.
that's how I figured out when Nick said that you confirmed that you'll be able to speak. And I tried to find through the Instagram. I see that page and I'm like, oh, okay. I
Right.
got about 10 to 12 hours that I need to dedicate to that.
It might be longer than that. Don't kill yourself, though.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you again for your time, Jonah, and thank you everybody who listened.
Thank you for having me. Really, really appreciate it.
Yep, we'll make sure we save it and then we'll upload it to YouTube later. Whenever it's done, either me or Nick will email it to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jonah.
Thank you.